A very good morning to all brothers and sisters in the Dhamma who have logged in to join our Sunday Pūjā in Unison. This meaningful weekly event is organized by Maha Satipatthana Buddhist Society and initiated by Theravada Buddhist Council Malaysia. It's a blessing indeed that two of my friends, Sister Doris and Sister Chukan, will be joining me in chanting and reflecting on the Buddha's teachings. As for the Dhamma sharing, we are very pleased to have Brother Ghatikara Loo with us this morning, and he will be sharing with us his thoughts on the topic: are 5 precepts sufficient to at least maintain human status? I'm sure everyone is interested to know if our practice of keeping our 5 precepts will be sufficient or not. So do stay tuned for the Dhamma sharing session after our Puja. Dear brothers and sisters, before we begin our Puja service, let's compose our minds and reflect on the significance of the virtual offerings that we shall make to our blessed teacher, the Buddha. Offering of lights. May we offer these candles burning brightly out of deep respect and veneration to our enlightened master, the Buddha. May these lights symbolically guide us to the light of the Dhamma, which dispels the darkness of greed with the light of generosity, the gloominess of hatred with the light of love, and the darkness of ignorance with the light of wisdom through the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Offering of joss sticks and incense. May we offer these joss sticks and incense out of deep respect and veneration to our blessed master, the Buddha. May the fragrance of these joss sticks and incense be pleasing unto the gods and devas. May our good deeds be like the fragrance of these joss sticks, cultivating compassion, patience, tolerance, understanding, and love towards all living beings. Offering of water. May we offer this glass of clean water to symbolize, to cultivate the virtues of calmness, clarity, and purity. Let it be our spiritual defilements and delusion through the cultivation of generosity, compassion, and wisdom. Offering of flowers. These flowers too, we offer out of deep respect and gratitude to our compassionate master, the Buddha. These flowers, sweet, beautiful, and choice, are clustered at the feet of our noble master. Beautiful as they are now, they will soon, with passing of time, wilt and fade and be cast away. Reflecting thus on this very nature of unsatisfactoriness, impermanence, and soullessness, let us tread the path shown by the Buddha for the eradication of sufferings here and now. Dear brothers and sisters, let's continue to compose our minds and give our highest salutations to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha by saying sadhu 3 times. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Sammadhiyami Adinādana Veramani Kami Sammadhiyami Musawada Veramani Sikkhapadang Sammadhiyami. Surameraya Macca Pamadatthana Veramani Sikkhapadang Sammadhiyami. Iti piso bhagavata jara satta dewa manussanang buddho bhagavata Swakato bhagavamo antokalo paccattam vedittabbo vinyuhiti Supatipanno bhagavato sāvaka sangho Ujupatipanno bhagavato sāvaka sangho Nyāyapatipanno bhagavato sāvaka sangho Samicipatipanno bhagavato sāvaka sangho Yadidang cattari purisa yugani atta purisa puggala esa bhagavato sāvaka sangho Ahuneyo pahuneyo dakhineyo anjali karaniyo anuttarang punya khettang lokasati.
Vandami citiyang sabbang sabbathanesu patittitang 𝓟𝓾𝓷𝓸𝓷 bodhing buddha rupang sakalang sada yassamule nisinnova sappārijayang akha patto sapanyutang satta vande tang bodhipādapang ime ete maha bodhi 𝓤𝓾𝓷𝓷𝓼 pujita ahang pite namassami bodhiraja namattute gandasarappaditena dipena tamadangsina 𝓤𝓾𝓷𝓭𝓪𝓂 sambuddhang pujayami tamonudang gandasambara yuttena dupena hang sugandina pujaye pujaniyang tang puja pajana muttamang adivase tuno bante haniyang parikappitang anukampang upadaya patikan hatu muttamang adivase tuno bante bojanang parikappitang anukampang upadaya patikan hatu muttamang adivase tuno bante gilana paccaya imang anukampang upadaya patikan hatu muttana vannaganna guno petang เอตังกุสุมสันตติงปูจยามิมุนิงดัสสะสิริพาดาสโรรุเทปูเจมิบุตดังกุสุเมนะเนนะปุญเยนะเมเตนะจะโหตุมกกังปุพพังมิลายาติยถาอิดังเมขายโยทัทธายาติวินาสภาวังอัคคาสัตตาจะบุมมัตตาเดวานากามหิตติกาปุญญันทังอนุโมดิตวาชิรัมรักขันตุโลกสาสนังอัคคาสัตตาจะบุมมัตตาเดวานากามหิตติกาปุญญันทังอนุโมดิตวาชิรัมรักขันตุเดสนังอัคคาสัตตาจะบุมมัตตาเดวานากามหิตติกาปุญญันตังอนุโมดิตวาชิรัมรักขันตุมัมปรันติเดโววัสสตุคาเลนะสัสสะสัมปัตติเหตุเจปีโตภวตุโลโกเจราจาภวตุดัมมิโกอิดังเมยตินังโหตุสุขิตาหอนตุญาตโยอิดังเมญาตินังโหตุสุขิตาหอนตุญาตโยอิดังเมญาตินังโหตุสุขิตาหอนตุญาตโยอิมินาปุญญกัมเมนะมาเมปาลสัมมากัมโมสตังสัมมากัมโมโหตุยาวานิบานปัตติยากายเยนะวัจจาจิตเตนะปมาเดนะมายากตังอัจจยังกัมเมบันเตปุริปัญญาตถากตากายเยนะวาจาจิตเตนะปมาเดนะมายากตังอัจจยังกัมเมดัมมาสันดิตติกาคาลิกากายเยนะวาจาจิตเตนะปมาเดนะมายากตังอัจจยังกัมเมสังฆาสุปฏิปันนาอนุตตรา
การณียมัตตกุสเลนะยันตังสันตังปดังอภิสเมจจาสักโกอุจุชะสุจุชะสุวัจโจจัสสมุดุอนาติมานิสันตุสโกชะสุบาโรชะอัปปกิจโจชะสัลลังกวุตติสันติงดริโยชะนิปโกชะอัปปกัปโบคุเลสุอนานุกิตโตนาชะคุตตังสัมมาชะเรกินจิเยนะวินยูปะเรอุปวะเดยุสุขิโนวาเคมิโนหันตุสัพเพสัตตาภวันตุสุขิตัตตาเยเกจิปานะภูตัตติตัสสาวะตาวราวะอนาวะเสสาดีกาวะเยมหันตาวะมัจจิมารัสสกานุกตุลาติตาวะเยวะอดิตตาเยชะดูเรวะสันติอเวดูเรบูตาวาสัมภเวสิวาสัพเพสัตตาภวันตุสุขิตัตตานาปโรปรังนิคุปเปตานาติมัญเยตกัตตชินังกัญจิBiaro sana patiga sanya nanya manya saduka miceya mata yata niyang putang ayusa eka putta manurakhe Evang pi sabba bhutesu manasang bhavaye aparimanang mettang cha sabba lokasming manasang bhavaye aparimanang Uddang ado cha tiriyancha asang badang averang asapattang titang charang nisinova sayanova yavatassa vigadamito etang sating aditeya brahmametang viharang idamahu Ditting cha anupagamma silava dasanena sampanno kame suvinaya gedang nahi jatu gabbaseyang punareti etena satchavajjena sottite hotu sabbada Etena satchavajjena sotite hotu sabbada. Etena satchavajjena sotite hotu sabbada. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Sister Doris and Sister 𝓤𝓾𝓷𝓫 for taking time to be with us this morning. Let's welcome Brother Ghatikara Loo to begin with this Dhamma sharing. Brother Ghatikara Loo, please be invited.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sister Lily. Yes, a very good morning, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. Greetings to everyone. I'm indeed very happy this morning that I'm able to share the Dhamma with you again. Okay, so before we begin with today's Dhamma sharing, let us put our palms together in Anjali and pay our highest and deepest respect and homage, to the Buddha, the Blessed One, whom through his deep sacrifice and his great effort, he has rediscovered the path to liberation, and that has enabled us to practice the true Dhamma. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, a very good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Dhamma sharing. Okay, so for today's discussion, I've actually selected this topic, and I'm going to be focusing, and investigating, this topic with regard to the observance of sila, which is the Pali term, for morality or virtues. And this morality or sila, it is indeed a very important part and component, in our practice of the Dhamma, as we thread the spiritual journey, and as we practice the Dhamma, this sila, constitutes a very pivotal, and integral component, in our spiritual practice. As you know, for the monastics, for the renunciants, the spiritual journey, can actually be encapsulated, in terms of sila, samadhi, and panya. And for lay people, lay Buddhists, our spiritual journey can actually be, in a nutshell, we can actually encapsulate it, in terms of dana, sila, and bhavana. So if you actually look at these two parts, in terms of the spiritual journeys for the renunciants as well as for the lay Buddhists, we find that this sila or morality, it represents the common denominator, between the monastics, the renunciants, and the lay Buddhists. So as we can see, this sila itself, constitutes a very important and pivotal component in our spiritual journey. And we can actually understand that because it actually represents the cornerstone, of any spiritual practice. If there is actually no sila, then of course, we can't even speak of any further spiritual, progress, or spiritual development, from there on. That's why I've selected this topic itself, and I'm going to be investigating this question, to what extent lay Buddhists should actually practice sila in order for us to at least maintain our human status. As you know, right now, we are actually very fortunate to be reborn, in a time, where the Buddha Sasana, the Buddha's dispensation is still very much, taught, by monastics. It's still very much, known, and taught by monastics, and we are actually in a very fortunate time, because from the suttas, we can actually see, that the opportunity to be reborn as a human being is indeed very rare. As you know, maybe perhaps from various Dhamma talks, you actually have heard, the similes are given by the Buddha, the Blessed One, in terms of how rare, the opportunity to be reborn as a human being. For example, the Buddha in this Shigala Sutta, the sutta about the whole, where the Buddha describes about this blind turtle, that is able to surface to the surface of this vast ocean. Only perhaps in 100 years, once in 100 years, is able to surface to the surface of the ocean, and the chance of this turtle being able to put his head around a yoke, a hole in the yoke, and that is actually the probability, the likelihood of how one can be reborn as a human being. And we can also see from this Nakasita Sutta, the sutta about this fingernails, and this is actually from Samyutta Nikaya 20.2, and where the Buddha actually draws some amount of soil, in his fingernail, and he actually asked the monks, to compare between the soil in the fingernail and the great soil on earth, so which is more. And then, of course, the monks say, the great earth definitely is more compared to the little soil in the Blessed One's fingernail. So the Buddha says, that is how it is. This is in terms of the soil in the fingernail. Actually, it actually reflects the number of beings, who are actually reborn as human beings, as compared to the great this soil on earth, where beings, human beings, upon passing away, they are reborn in other woeful planes. So the Buddha says, the number of human beings who continue to be reborn as human beings, or perhaps go up to the heavenly realms, it is actually as little as the dust in the fingernails, as compared to the the great mass of soil on earth, which is actually the number of human beings who actually, upon passing away, they descend into the woeful planes. So in this sutta itself, both these suttas actually underscore the very rare opportunity, as to how we can be reborn, as human beings. So that's why we should actually take heed of what the Buddha has has actually emphasized, again and again in the suttas, that we are indeed very fortunate to be reborn as human beings, during this time, when the Buddha Sasana, is still very much alive, and the Buddha's teachings are still very much accessible, even though the Buddha has actually passed into parinibbana, more than 2,500 years ago. We are still very fortunate that the true teachings in its pristine form are still able to be translated from generation to generation until today, as recorded in the suttas, and we are able to actually read the suttas as though the Buddha was actually beside us. So we should actually then take this this opportunity very carefully, and we should actually remind ourselves, that it is indeed a very rare opportunity, and we should take heed of the Buddha's advice, and practice the Dhamma, steadfastly, and assiduously as much as we can. So as human beings, we are actually at a very crossroad. If you at a very important crossroad, if you actually look at it very, very logically and very carefully, we are now walking on a path where our path now forks into two directions. It's either the right path or the left path. At the crossroad, it forks out into two directions. On the right path, represents rebirth in the heavenly realms, or continue to be born as a human. That is what we call the Sugati Bhumi. It's a happy, favorable realms. And on the left side, we actually have rebirth in the woeful plains, the Apaya realms. In terms of being rebirth as a Peta, as an afflicted spirit, or as an animal, or indeed in hell, in the Niraya, So, where suffering abounds. So now we are at the crossroad, whether we want to actually take the right fork or the left fork, it's actually much depends on us. The decision is in our hands. So we actually need to ensure that our practice of the Dhamma is in accordance with the true Dhamma as taught by the Buddha, the Blessed One. And the Buddha, in all the suttas, time and time again, he has actually emphasized the importance of safeguarding our sila, our morality, because that is the foundation, that will actually provide us, the ability, and the potential for us to be reborn, at least as a human being, if you actually observe your sila, and of course, if you actually guard it well, and on top of that, you actually also, practice, dana, well, then you will be, reborn, in happy and happy destinations, in either as a human being, or in the heavenly realms, in the celestial realms. So now, of course, then it actually begs the question, as to what extent should us as lay Buddhists practice sila or morality. So, which is why I actually find this question very interesting. To what extent, or perhaps I should rephrase it in another way, paraphrase in such a way, that is it really sufficient for us to just practice the 5 precepts, in order for us to at least maintain the human status? That's the question we need to, answer, this morning, today's Dhamma sharing, because more often than not, if I were to ask any Buddhist with this question, right, is it sufficient to practice 5 precepts? I'm sure, most Buddhists, if not all, would actually respond by saying, yes, of course, and I'm a bit surprised, puzzled why you actually need to ask such a basic question, right? Aren't lay Buddhists are supposed to observe 5 precepts, at the very least, to ensure, that our sila is well guarded, and with that, I'm sure, by observing the 5 precepts alone itself, provides us, with the necessary factor, and equips us with the necessary requisite requirement for us to be reborn, as a human being. I'm sure most lay Buddhists will actually respond in that way, and it is, of course, not surprising, that we will actually get this answer, because since young, we have actually been inculcated, with this teaching, that as lay Buddhists, we should observe the 5 precepts. For example, children, when they go to Dhamma school, I'm sure they will also be taught, that 5 precepts are the very essential, component in our spiritual practice, in the practice of the Dhamma, that we must all, as lay Buddhists, observe, the 5 precepts, at all times, safeguard it, impeccably, and assiduously, right? So that is what we have actually been taught all this while, and even when we, when we perform puja as well, we actually recite, the 5 precepts, as one of the verses, that we will actually recite, in our puja, to actually remind ourselves the importance of safeguarding our morality, safeguarding our sila. So it becomes very much ingrained, in lay Buddhism, that 5 precepts are the are the minimum, that that we should practice the 5 precepts, and by practicing 5 precepts alone, we are actually we have actually practiced it well. If we practice it well, then we will be able to have the necessary we would actually have practiced it, the Dhamma, in a way that we'll be able to be reborn in the happy destinations in the Sugati Bhumi, or at least as a human being, and we will not actually fall into the woeful planes. So that is actually the common view that's held by Buddhists nowadays, the lay Buddhists nowadays. So it is I find that it's actually very important and also very interesting, for this topic, to be actually raised as a discussion. And we need to actually investigate and evaluate, exactly, what the Blessed One actually teaches us in terms of observing our morality, our sila, as recorded in the suttas, so that we'll be able to practice in a sufficient manner that we will not fall into the woeful planes, and at least maintain our status as a human being. So that is a very important question that we need to address. And so for today's Dhamma sharing, let me just share my screen before I proceed to further elaborate on this. Okay. Okay. So for this question, right, in terms of how lay Buddhists should observe morality or sila, to a sufficient level that we can be sure, that we will not fall into the woeful planes. Okay, let us pose this question to the Buddha, the Blessed One, and see, how the Buddha would have actually answered it, right? Based on the Sutta Nikayas. The discourses are given by the Buddha. And the first sutta that I'd like to highlight is actually extracted from this, the numerical discourses, Anguttara Nikaya 2.18. The title of sutta is categorically, and here, it actually records an occasion where, Venerable Ananda, he actually went to see the Buddha, and Venerable Ananda actually asked, he actually had this conversation with the Blessed One, and the Buddha actually asked Venerable Ananda, he said, he actually made a statement. He said, I say categorically, Ananda, that bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, and mental disconduct should not be done, And then, of course, Venerable Ananda said, what drawbacks can one expect, when doing what should not be done, And the Buddha actually then says, if one actually performs, misconduct, whether by body, by speech and by mind, there are these disadvantages and drawbacks, then one can expect, when doing, what should not be done. One can find fault oneself, Observant people on close examination will criticize one. One will actually be criticized and be reprimanded by the wise, because one does misconduct by body, speech and mind. And one's reputation gets spread out, that one does not observe the morality, and performs this misconduct, and one dies confused, and on the break of the body after death, one reappears in the plane of deprivation, in a bad destination and lower realms, in hell. So you see, from this sutta itself, the Buddha actually has emphasized, the importance of safeguarding, our morality, by exercising self-restraint, such that we do not perform, any misconduct, whether by body, speech, and mind, because if you do, then there are these disadvantages that one will actually reap from performing such unwholesome actions. And one in the present life, one does not only get criticized, and reprimanded, the reputation, the bad reputation spreads, that one actually has bad morality, you know, and upon the dissolution, you know, of the one's life, you know, one actually dies or confused, you know, and upon the breakout of the body, one reappears in the higher realm, you know, in the woeful plains, in the lower realms, you know, in hell. You know? So that is the message, you know, that the Buddha has actually emphasized in the suttas, you know, over and again in so many suttas that the Buddha emphasized. That is the cornerstone, you know, of any spiritual practice. Yeah, if you want to advance yourself spiritually, you know, the very basic important component that one should actually cultivate and perfect is actually one's morality. That is the cornerstone of the spiritual life. You know, and of course, after having spoken about the negative, you know, Buddha talks about, you know, the positive, which is actually wholesome body, speech, and mind. You know, if you actually perform wholesome speech and mind, then the reward is that, you know, one gets praised. One doesn't find fault, you know, with oneself. You know, one doesn't. Sometimes when you have done something bad, you know, something unwholesome, you feel guilt, right? You know, and you feel this guilt, the guilty conscience, you know, arises in you, you know, and you actually find fault with yourself, you know, and your reputation, you know, gets yeah, you know, and if you actually do this wholesome actions, your good reputation gets spread out, you know, and if you actually perform wholesome actions, then you don't find fault with yourself, you know, and one actually dies unconfused, you know, and upon breakup of the body after death, one reappears, you know, in a good destination in the heavenly world. You know? So this sutta itself, you know, actually emphasizes the importance, you know, of safeguarding, you know, our body, speech, and mind in terms of our conduct. You know, so whether you are reborn, you know, as in the favorable destinations, you know, in the Sugati Bhumi, either as a Deva, as a Brahma, you know, or as a human being, or whether, you know, you actually descend, you know, into the woeful plains, you know, into the hell as in the animal or afflicted spirits, you know, very much depends, you know, on your conduct by body, speech, and mind. You know, whether you misconduct yourself or whether you conduct yourself well, and you know, through the exercise of self-restraint, is very much you know, the decision is actually in your hands. You know? So this sutta itself highlights the importance of safeguarding the sila. And of course, in this next sutta, in AN 11.1, again, you know, the Buddha emphasizes the importance, you know, of safeguarding, you know, your sila, you know, as the cornerstone, you know, in your spiritual practice. And in this sutta, again, you know, it is actually a conversation between Venerable Ananda, you know, and the Buddha, the Blessed One, you know, and the Buddha in this sutta, right? The Venerable Ananda actually asks, you know, the Buddha, you know, why is safeguarding sila, you know, so important, you know, and this question is asked to the Buddha, you know, what is the purpose, you know, of skillful virtues, you know, what is the purpose of actually safeguarding our sila, you know, what is the reward, you know, and the Buddha, of course, answers, you know, in a very systematic, you know, in a progressive, you know, structure, you know, that actually will actually make you understand why you know, safeguarding sila is important. Because if you have impeccable sila, you know, and you safeguard your sila well, you know, skillful virtues, you know, will actually lead to freedom from remorse. Okay, because when you actually have you know, good sila, you know, then you are free from remorse and regret, you know, because you know that, you know, you have lived your life well, you know, and you have perform yourself well, you know, in terms of body, speech, and mind, you know, and you have conducted yourself in a wholesome manner, you know, in all three respects, and you find that there is this joy that arises in you. So the first thing is you have this freedom from remorse, and freedom of remorse leads to joy as its purpose, you know, and joy itself leads to rapture, you know, rapture. And rapture itself leads to serenity, you know, because you experience this rapture in you, where you actually have goosebumps, you know, in you. You feel this sense of utter great excitement in you, you know, this rapture. And after this rapture has actually subsided, and then you feel this tranquility in you, you know, this serenity, you know, and this serenity will lead to pleasure, you know, as the purpose, you know, and this pleasure itself actually leads to samadhi, you know, the Buddha says. Because you have pleasure in you, you know, it actually leads to samadhi. It's translated as concentration, you know, but I rather translate it as composure, you know. You have this samadhi in you, and with this samadhi actually leads to what? Leads to knowledge and vision of things as they really are, you know. Yatha Bhuta Yana Dasana, you can see things as they really are, this samadhi. And this knowledge and vision, the things as they really are, what does it lead to? It leads to disenchantment, and disenchantment itself leads to dispassion, this viraga, this dispassion. And this dispassion itself, what does it lead to? It leads to knowledge and vision of release as its purpose, And ultimately, the Buddha says that in this way, Ananda, skillful virtues, which is sila, lead step by step to the consummation of arahantship, See, the Buddha says, to attain arahantship, the very basic building block itself is actually our sila, our morality. That is the very cornerstone of our spiritual practice. If you don't even have sila to begin with, then there's actually no spiritual practice to actually speak of, You can't even actually reach, a stream entry, to begin with, because you don't actually have, you're not actually impeccable, in your observance of the sila. You don't actually observe sila, which is actually dear to the noble ones. So because of that, you see, can you just see from the sutta itself, over and over again, the Buddha emphasized the very importance of observing our sila. So we should take heed that as lay people, in our practice of the Dhamma, we must always bear this in mind and be mindful, that sila itself is a very, very important component. Is in fact pivotal, and critical, in our practice of the Dhamma, and we must actually safeguard it assiduously at all times. Okay, and I shall discuss with you later on, as to how we can ensure that we practice our sila well. But first of all, let us redirect our mind again to the question, that has been posed for this Dhamma discussion, this Dhamma sharing, in terms of whether it's sufficient for us to practice 5 precepts alone. Okay, but here I've added another sutta here, which I've also covered last time. It is Anguttara Nikaya 10.177 is about this sutta on Janu Sonin, sutta about this Brahmin, who actually had this conversation with the Buddha, in terms of he was actually asking the Buddha, what if someone actually does a lot of dana, he is very generous, and he actually offers, all the requisites to the sangha, to the monks, and he's very he actually has an open hand, he's very charitable, but he actually does not observe his sila, he breaks his 5 precepts, and does a lot of unwholesome actions by body, speech, and mind, So what will actually happen to such a person, then I've actually mentioned before in this sutta, that if that this person does a lot of dana, but does not observe the sila, then with the breakup of the body after death, he reappears in the company of elephants, the royal elephants, in terms reappears in the company of the royal horses, in the company of poetry, where they actually are showered with a lot of luxuries, and a lot of good food, a very conducive place to stay in, and given, a very comfortable treatment, all because of the effects from the dana they have done. But because they don't actually observe the sila well, then they actually fail, to maintain their human status, and because of that, they descend, into the animal realms. Whilst they are able to reap the effects from the good dana, by actually having royal treatments, from the palace, or perhaps as pet dogs and pet cats, in rich men households, where they're given really comfortable beds to stay in, and given showers with all the luxuries, but they are still animals, they are not they are not able to maintain their human status, and they actually become animals, and they are not able to practice the Dhamma, because they just don't have the ability to comprehend the Dhamma, So because of that, they lose the ability to practice the Dhamma, to at least reach stream entry. They actually lose the chance, because of that. So because of this sutta, we actually then again understand the importance of why observing the sila is so important. Do not just do a lot of dana, but then you actually neglect your observing your precepts, and because of that, you actually descend into the animal realms. So again, in this Iti Vuttaka as well, again, I just want to just share with you this sutta where the Buddha actually then also highlights the importance of observing the sila. He says, aspiring to 3 forms of bliss, a wise person should guard his virtue. So the Buddha says, if you wish for praise to come to you, or if you wish for wealth to come to you, or if you wish that upon my death, upon the breakup of this body, may I reappear in a good destination, in a favorable, to have a favorable rebirth in a Sugati Bhumi, in a happy destination, then you should actually guard your sila well. You see, so many suttas the Buddha has emphasized again and again the importance of observing the precepts, and your morality, and you see, the Buddha says, not only should you actually guard your sila well, you should not associate with your friends who do not actually guard their sila well. You see here in the middle section here that I've highlighted in yellow. Even if you do no evil, okay, but seek out ones who does. You are suspected of evil. Your bad reputation grows. The sort of person you make a friend, the sort you seek out, that's the sort you yourself become, for your living together is of that sort. So even if you got your precepts well, but you actually associate with the fools and for those who actually don't guard their sila, then Buddha says then you are also you also then create the bad reputation, and sooner or later, you actually become one of them as well. If your spiritual will and your determination is not strong enough, then you get actually pulled in, into their sort. Means you start to break your precepts as well, because it is always easier to break your precepts than to safeguard it. And so, if your will is not strong and you meet with the wrong company, then you will actually become one of them. And even if you don't, your reputation actually gets soiled. Because you mix with such people, and people develop suspicion that you're also not, you're also one of them. You're also not, observing your sila just like the rest of the people, in your group. Okay, so again, you see in this Iti Vuttaka, the Buddha has emphasized again the importance, of safeguarding sila. So now the next question is, so to what extent should we actually practice this sila as lay Buddhism? So the question now is whether it's sufficient for us to just practice the 5 precepts, or is there more? Okay, so perhaps we should then also look at the suttas, what the Buddha actually has taught, with regard to observing our sila. First of all, may I refer you to this Sutta AN 7.6, where the Buddha actually speaks of these 7 treasures. The Buddha was giving this discourse to the monks, and the Buddha actually spoke of these 7 treasures. And what are these 7? The treasure of conviction, which is your saddha, your conviction, which is your faith. That's another translation. Saddha, the treasure of virtue, which is actually your sila. The treasure of conscience, the treasure of concern, which is your 𝓤𝓷𝓲𝓷, the hiri, the shame of doing evil, and this otapa is the fear of doing evil. It's like, how can I be doing such an evil thing? You're so shameful of yourself, and you also feel fear. What's going to happen? I perform such an unwholesome action. This karma is actually going to follow me like a shadow. You have this fear, that this unwholesome action, if done, will bring about bad results, in a matter of time, So you have this treasure of concern and treasure of conscience, 𝓤𝓷𝓲𝓷, the treasure of listening, listening to the Dhamma itself, the treasure of generosity, and this chaga, and the treasure of discernment, which is your panya, which is wisdom. So the Buddha actually ascribed these 7 items, these 7 factors, as 7 treasures that what we should actually try to cultivate, and try to develop, and cultivate. And you see, in terms of virtue, what does the Buddha say about the treasure of virtue? Let me just bring you to this 3rd paragraph. And the Buddha says here, what is the treasure of virtue? This is the case where a disciple of noble ones abstains from taking life. What we actually always recite, right? Panatipata, right? Vairamani, I abstain from, taking life, of deliberately taking life, and abstains from stealing, which is taking things which are not given, adina dana, and it abstains from illicit sexual conduct, which is sensual misconduct, right? And then there's also this abstinence, from lying, and abstinence from taking intoxicants that cause heedlessness, right? So if you can see from here, these 5 items that the Buddha has actually highlighted here. This monk is actually called the treasure of virtue, which is our sila. So in this sutta itself, the Buddha actually speaks of this 5 precepts, in observing, in observing virtue. The Buddha in this sutta, about the 7 treasures, the Buddha speaks of the 5 precepts. What I mentioned just now, in terms of killing, stealing, then the kamesu michachara, in terms of sensual misconduct, mustavada, and then also taking of intoxicants that cause heedlessness. So the Buddha, in this sutta actually speaks of the 5 precepts. So this is the first sutta that I want to highlight to you. This AN 7.6, the Buddha has actually made reference to these 5 precepts that the Buddha asks us to observe, okay? Which is actually one of the 7 treasures. And again, if you want to get more information about what the Buddha also speaks about observing the silas for the lay people, you can also refer to this DN 31 about this 𝓟𝓾𝓷𝓷 Sutta. I'm sure this is something that's actually very well known. I'm sure all of you have actually come across this sutta about the Buddha giving advice to this young Brahmin, who was actually following the advice of his father, who had passed away, and asking to actually pay respect to 6 quarters, to 6 directions. And with regard, to the direction of observing virtue, you just look at what the Buddha actually highlights to this young Brahmin, this 𝓟𝓾𝓷𝓷, this young householder. The Buddha actually says in terms of observing the virtues for lay people, then the lay people should act, the laity should ensure that they abstain from killing, stealing, adultery, sexual misconduct, and lying. These are the 4 evils that the wise never praise. Okay, we have the 4 precepts here. And of course, then the Buddha actually then goes on to talk about indulgence in intoxicants which cause infatuation and heedlessness, which is actually our 5th precept, right? Of actually taking, intoxicants that actually cause heedlessness, So you see, the Buddha actually highlights about these 5 precepts, in the observance of sila, for this young Brahmin, this young Sigala, So again, this sutta then talks about, the observing of the 5 precepts. Okay, so now we already have 2 suttas, right? That the Buddha talks about the 5 precepts. Okay, then next, we go on to investigate another sutta, which is also interesting. If you can see from here. Okay, this is actually from the book of 8, this numerical discourses. In numerical discourses, there are actually 11 books. So this is actually from the book of 8. So this AN 8.39, the Buddha actually tells the monks there are these 8 rewards of merits, rewards of skillfulness and nourishment of happiness, celestial resulting in happiness, leading to heavens, to the Sugati Bhumi, all this leading to heavens, to celestial realms, where you actually have abundance of happiness, and enjoyment, leading to what is desirable, pleasurable, and appealing into your welfare and happiness. And what 8? Okay. Okay, see the Buddha here. The Buddha says the first one is actually where the noble disciple has gone to the Buddha for refuge. Okay, and then has gone to the Dhamma for refuge. He has gone to the Buddha for refuge. Okay. And then he has gone to the Buddha for refuge here. Okay. And then one has also gone to the Dhamma as refuge. Okay. And then one has gone to the Sangha for refuge. Okay. So these are the 3 rewards, that you actually reap in terms of going to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha for refuge. Okay, so it's really 3, right? So now we have another 5. So you see here, the Buddha actually talks about the other 5 items is what? In terms of abandoning, and abstaining from taking life, from stealing, from illicit sensual misconduct, from lying, and taking of intoxicants. You see, again, the Buddha actually talks about the 5 precepts, but in this case, the Buddha has actually added, 3 items, which is taking refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. 3 plus 5, it reaches 8. So 3, taking refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and then 5 in terms of observing your 5 precepts. So all in all, is actually 8 rewards, which lead to heavens, to celestial realms, to the company of the devas, and and where you reap all these pleasurable and desirable results, and this is actually from AN 8.39. Okay, then interestingly, this is 8.39, right? Then if you go to 8.40, there's this another sutta called the Vipaka results. Vipaka is a Pali term for results, right? The fruit, that you reap from the action that you've done. So that's why you have karma vipaka, right? So here in 8.40, AN 8.40, the Buddha speaks of this Vipaka sutta, So in this sutta itself, again, you can see from here, the Buddha actually talks about the effects, if you actually commit and breach the five your precepts, what is the result, if you actually commit unwholesome actions by actually breaching and not following the precepts, then here you can see here the Buddha talks about what? The Buddha talks about taking of life. Firstly, it's about taking of life, which is actually killing, right? And then when indulged in, this leads to to hell, leads to rebirth as a common animal and leads to the realm of the hungry shades. You see, so the Buddha again highlights, in this sutta, if you commit the taking of life, then this action itself will actually lead to the upper realms, to the woeful plains, in the hell, as an animal realm, as well as in the Peta realm, which is the hungry shades, the afflicted spirits. Then, when one becomes a human being, for example, after all this evil karma has actually been burnt, right, has been exhausted, and you actually get sort of like a reprieve, like suddenly you're giving a chance to be reborn as a human being, after your bad karma has actually been exhausted, you're giving a chance, a reprieve that something like a parole, and then you become a human being. Then the Buddha says if you become a human being, it leads to short lifespan because you have done a lot of killing in the past. Same goes for stealing. It also leads to the woeful plains, to the three upper realms if you do it. Okay, but when one becomes a human being, as when you have the chance, it leads to loss of one's health, one's wealth. Because you have stolen in the past, you've taken others' properties. So because of that, the result is that when you become a human being again, after your karma is exhausted in the woeful plains, then you actually tend to lose your wealth, very frequently. Sometimes you just lose wealth for no reason. You get cheated, you get scammed, and your wealth just dissipates, maybe by disasters, so maybe by floods or by fire, or and for no reasons, you just lose your wealth. Because of what? Because you have actually stolen in your past life. And then next, the Buddha says if you actually commit this sexual misconduct, which is sensual misconduct, of this will leads to rebirth in the upper realms, in the woeful plains. Then when you become a human being, it leads to rivalry and revenge. You actually have a lot of rivals, and people are always they don't like you. You always have a lot of rivals that actually they don't like you and they want to take revenge on you. Because of what? Because you have actually done a lot of this sexual misconduct. You have actually misconduct yourself sexually, and it leads to a lot of suffering for others. So that itself, will get translated in your own suffering. Where you have a lot of rivalry and revenge. People want to take revenge on you. And they always they don't like you. And they treat you as a rival. And next, the Buddha says, if you actually tell a lot of falsehood, you tell a lot of lies, this leads also to the woeful plains. And then when you become a human being, it leads to being falsely accused. Means when you tell a lot of lies, when you become a human being, you tend to be falsely accused by things you didn't do. Because of certain circumstantial evidence, that's not favorable to you. You happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and you become a prime suspect, even though you did not commit the act yourself. But you become falsely accused because of the lies that you have done. And then the Buddha says, you see, the Buddha here does not actually talk about just telling lies. The Buddha also talks about what? Divisive tale bearing, which is actually telling tales, and you actually you actually backbite, and you actually involved in tail bearing, you are involved in malicious speech, and you whatever that you hear, from another person, you actually tell the other person, do you know that, so and so actually says that about you, and you actually create discord, from this malicious speech that you're actually involved in, because you like to carry tales, and you like to actually involved in this malicious speech that actually creates discord and disharmony, between two persons who otherwise who are on good terms, and this will actually also lead to the woeful plains. And then when you become a human being, it leads to breaking of one's friendships. For no reason, your friends just somehow just decide to actually they just decide to break the friendship. They just somehow they just for no reason they decide to actually break off the relationship, or maybe perhaps due to various reasons. You're not able to actually maintain your good friendship with someone because of this tail bearing that you have actually done in the past as well. Okay, and next, the Buddha actually speaks of harsh speech. Where you actually speak in very harsh manner, you use vulgar language, you speak in a way that is not gentle, that actually leads to discord, leads to disharmony, and you treat others, in a way, that is contentious, and you use harsh speech towards others, and if you actually commit this harsh speech, then the Buddha says it leads to also to the lower realms, to the woeful plains. But when you become a human being, it leads to unappealing sounds. So you keep on hearing sounds which are unappealing, because of the harsh speech that you've actually spoken in the past. And the next, the Buddha also says you should actually abstain from frivolous chattering, or in Pali what we call sampa palapa. This frivolous speech, is where you actually engage, in you're engaged in gossiping. You want to you actually gossip about others. You actually speak of things which are not related to the Dhamma, and you speak at the wrong time. And this is what the Buddha says is actually frivolous speech. It's speech that is actually not beneficial, not conducive. And it is you actually you're actually involved in gossiping, and carrying tales, about others affairs. So if you're involved in this frivolous speech, it itself also leads to the woeful plains. And when you become a human being, it leads to words that aren't worth taking to heart. So you actually tend to hear a lot of things, which are also not beneficial to you. That is the result, because you yourself actually speak, a lot of this unbeneficial and frivolous speech. So in return, you also hear of a lot of words which are spoken to you, which are actually not beneficial as well. They are just like pure nonsense and pure nonsensical, and pure rubbish. And you just hear a lot of this speech being said to you. So if you can see here, the Buddha, has not just spoken about just speaking falsehood, which is musavada, but the Buddha has actually added 3 more items here, which is actually tail bearing itself, which is pisuna vacha, tail bearing, where you actually involved in malicious speech, you backbite, you backstab others, you actually carry tales around, creating disharmony and discord among people, and you're involved in harsh speech, where you use a lot of vulgar language, you speak in a very harsh manner, to others, and another one, where the Buddha talks about this frivolous speech, which is sampa palapa, which is also unbeneficial, and frivolous talk, a lot of gossiping, a lot of unbeneficial speech that's actually being said here. So the Buddha has added these 3 items here, in terms of speech as well. It's not just about speaking falsehood, but also 3 other items, in terms of pisunavacha, tail bearing, in terms of malicious speech, in terms of harsh speech, and also in terms of frivolous speech, unbeneficial speech, And of course, the Buddha then concludes it, by making reference to drinking of fermented and distilled liquor, which is taking of intoxicants. The Buddha says if you indulge in this, if you take intoxicants, it is something that leads to the higher realms as well, to the three woeful planes. And when you become a human being, the Buddha says it leads to mental derangement. So if you have this inclination, and you like to drink a lot of intoxicants, so that is something that you should bear in mind, that if you do this, and if you break this precept, then it leads to woeful planes. Then once you get a reprieve and become a human being, then you tend to have mental illness, mental derangement. So sometimes we find, very young people, developing mental illnesses due to certain psychotic orders, and all these are sometimes, more often than not, is due to the karmic resultant from the action done in the past, where that perhaps that person could have been prone to taking intoxicants that leads to this mental confusion, and heedlessness. And once the person becomes a human being again, after the woeful planes, it leads to the mental derangement. So you see, from this sutta is very interesting. From this AN 8.40, the Buddha does not just talk about the 5 precepts, which is actually taking of life, stealing, sensual misconduct, telling of lies, and taking of intoxicants. The Buddha has actually added 3 more items, under speech. Because speech is actually very important. Although the tongue is a very small organ in our body, right? But the extent of the damage that it can do to us is really extensive. There are 4 things that you are prone to do. You may be prone into doing. Telling of lies, malicious speech, carrying tales, backstabbing, harsh speech, where you actually speak to someone very harshly using vulgar language, even not vulgar language also, but you speak in a very harsh manner, and also frivolous chattering as well, gossiping, a lot of this unbeneficial and nonsensical talk, So all these also, this is also one of the misconduct you do by speech, So in here we find, that there are these 8 precepts that have been spoken by the Buddha, the 5, the 5 precepts we've spoken, plus another 3 in terms of speech, So just now we have seen the Buddha talks about, the 5 precepts. Here is 5 plus 3, okay? You see, another sutta that I'd like to just highlight and contrast is actually what we can see from this Majjhima Nikaya in Sutta 41. Here the Buddha, he was actually giving a discourse to this people, to these people that lived in this Kosalans, these people that actually live in the Brahman village of the Kosalans. They were actually these people were actually from the village of Sala, So that's why this sutta is actually called the people of Sala, So here there is people of this Sala that lived in this among the Kosalans, this kingdom of Kosalan, right? There's this village called Sala. These people, they heard about, the Buddha, about how about the wonderful Dhamma that the Buddha has actually taught, and that the Buddha, is perfectly self-enlightened, They were all very impressed, and they actually asked the Buddha, this question. It's a very long sutta, but I just like to just condense it to this sutta in the middle. The Buddha, he actually, these people, they actually asked the Buddha, and they say, what is the reason why some beings here at the breakup of the body after death, they actually end up in the woeful plains, in the hell? And what is the cause? What's the reason, Master Gautama, why some beings here at the breakup of the body after here arise in a good destination, in the heavenly world? Here, of course, the Buddha then says, the reason why someone actually gets reborn in the woeful plains is because this person has actually conducted himself contrary to the Dhamma, faring by not Dhamma, And the reason why, a being actually is able to be reborn in the heavenly realms or as a human being, is because, of conduct, which is in line, which is in line and which is consonant with the Dhamma, which is in accordance with the Dhamma. Okay, so then the Buddha then elaborates, what he means by a conduct that's actually not in accordance with the Dhamma and contrary to the Dhamma. Here, if you look at the paragraph in the middle that I've shaded here, the Buddha actually highlights the items, the items, which are actually contrary to the Dhamma. The Buddha says, first of all, a person actually commits a killing. He is cruel, bloody-handed, intent on injuring and killing, without mercy to living creatures. Okay, this is the first item the Buddha speaks of. And then the second one, he's a taker of what's not given, which is stealing. Thirdly, he says he's a wronggoer in regards to pleasure of the senses, which means a sensual misconduct. Okay, so here the Buddha elaborates what is sensual misconduct. He has intercourse with girls protected by mother, protected by father, protected by parents, by brother, by sister, by relations, who have a husband, whose use involves punishment, and even with those adorned with garlands of betrothal. So here the Buddha says if you're actually involved in this, then actually there's sensual misconduct. Okay, that is actually 3 misconduct by body. Okay, then the Buddha then goes on to actually talk about misconduct by speech. See here, just like what I mentioned just now, the Buddha talks about false speech, which is musavada. Okay, of course, the Buddha goes into very detail here. The Buddha says, when this person is asked to be a witness before a council or company, and he's actually or meet a royal family, when he goes to a court hearing, right? And when someone asks you, now, good man, say what you know. Although he does not know, he says, I know. Although he knows, he says, I do not know. Although he has seen something, he says, although he has not seen something, he says, oh yeah, I saw. Although he has seen something, then he says, oh, I did not see. So he actually commits false speech. And then he's also a slanderer, you see, which means what I said just now in terms of malicious speech. He slanders other people, perhaps due to jealousy, or perhaps due to rivalry. He slanders, and he actually commits a malicious speech. He goes around spreading, telling others, what he hears from someone. He actually tells the other person, oh, do you know that this person say this and so about you? And then this person actually gets unhappy, and this creates discord and disharmony, and creates enemies between parties, and he rejoices in discord. He likes people to be to be quarreling, to be disharmony. He finds happiness in doing that. And he's a slanderer. You see here, discord is his pleasure. Discord is his delight. Discord is his joy. Discord is his motive for speech. He speaks with a motive to create dissension, and to break up, relationships. This is actually what this person does. He's a slanderer, and he's of harsh speech. Whatever speech is rough, hard, and severe on others, abusive, bordering on wrath. He actually utters all these. He actually speaks in very rough and hard manner. He's very abusive of others. Scolding others abusively. Bordering on anger. That's harsh speech. And then he's also a frivolous chatter who speaks at the wrong time, does not speak in accordance with the fact, gossiping about others, speaking things which are not, which are not Dhamma, and then his speech is not worth treasuring, is unbeneficial and, nonsensical, in a nutshell, it's nonsensical speech, So the Buddha says, misconduct is actually, in terms of this 4 misconduct, telling of lies, slanderous speech, harsh speech, and also frivolous speech. So here the Buddha has spoken about 4 misconduct by speech. So 3 plus 4, 3 is by body, 4 is by speech. And here the Buddha actually goes on to talk about 3 other items, that if you actually do these 3 other items, then you actually create the potential to actually fall into the woeful plains. What are these 3? These 3 items are actually 3 misconduct by mind. Okay. Here, the first thing the Buddha says, someone is covetous, when he covets what is the property of another's, means he is actually, he has got this greed, and he covets the properties belonging to another person, he says, he covets the property of another, thinking, that is that what is another's might be mine. Okay, he is malevolent in mind, corrupt in thought and purpose, which means in his mind he actually schemes, he actually covets the properties of another. Maybe he actually schemes to try to get the wealth of someone. Like he looks at the wealth or the properties of another person and says, oh, let me get my hands on those properties. Or it could be another person's spouse or wife, let me get my hands on another person's wife, So he covets the property of another, So that is what we call covetousness. And this is the kind of extent of the unwholesomeness that leads to the woeful plains, because of the evilness involved. You try to covet and try to get hold of another person's property. It's not as though you look at somebody's property and perhaps you say, oh, may one day may I be able to get that as well. And then you work hard towards it and you try to get the wealth to amass the ability to get another property. That is different, This is actually looking at trying to get another person's property, and you try to get your hands on the properties, by scheming and by trying various ways to get your hands on them. And then another one is actually ill will. The Buddha says, if you actually have this ill will and anger, and you actually think in this manner, let these beings be killed or slaughtered or annihilated or destroyed, and may they not exist at all, So here the Buddha says it's not just the normal anger or displeasure that you find, but this anger is in such a way that you actually hope for someone to actually disappear, be killed, and be annihilated, and you hope that may this person may this person be annihilated, be killed, may he be may he disappear, from this face of the earth. You have this evilness in you that you want this person to be got rid of. That is the kind of evilness you have. Sometimes we may even think, like, for example, this leader, is such a corrupt leader, I really hope I really hope that he gets killed, by or maybe I really hope that he maybe has a mishap, the plane crashes or something. I really hope that this leader may just die, So be really careful, of what you actually think in your mind. If you actually have this malevolent thought, you're creating the potential to be reborn in the woeful plains, because of the evilness in your mind. And you hope for someone to be extinguished, to be killed. So that is a kind of evilness, the kind of anger in you. It's a very potent and very anger to the extent of getting someone killed and destroyed. And of course, the third misconduct by mind, is where you actually have wrong view, that there's actually no result of giving, no fruit from doing good deeds, and there's no father, there's no mother, means that there's actually no benefit in supporting your parents. There's no spontaneous beings that actually get reborn, as maybe as devas, where they have spontaneous birth, or in the hell beings, or as petas, all these actually go through spontaneous rebirth, and you don't believe in all this, and you don't believe in rebirth, and you don't believe they're actually renunciants and ascetics, who have actually they actually practice well, and they realize, the true knowledge, you don't believe in all this, so when you hold such views, then it's also, wrong view, miccha ditthi, So here the Buddha actually talks about 3 misconduct by mind that will lead you to the woeful plains. Okay. So here we actually see that we actually have 3 misconduct by body, 4 misconduct by speech, and 3 misconduct by mind. So we actually have 3, 4, and 3. Okay. So So here, we find that the Buddha actually highlights about these 10 unwholesome actions, and the Buddha says if you commit these 10 unwholesome actions, then you create the potential, to be reborn in the woeful plains, Again, in this Majjhima Nikaya 42, the Buddha, also speaks of the same discourse as well, to the people of Varanja, and at that time the Buddha also was staying near Savatthi, under Pentika's monastery, and at that time, this Brahmin households of Varanja, actually came to Savatthi on some business, and they actually then also asked the Buddha the same question as well, in terms of why some beings actually, descend into the woeful plains and why some actually get reborn, in the happy destinations. And the Buddha again, speaks of these 10 unwholesome actions, which is the 10 𝓷𝓾𝓷𝓷, the 10 unwholesome actions that you should not perform these 10 unwholesome actions. Otherwise, you are creating the potential to be reborn in the woeful plains. See, here I've actually extracted a few suttas, but if you want to read the Pali canon, the Sutta Nikayas, you find that in many suttas, the Buddha talks about these 10 unwholesome actions, over and over again, that we should actually take great heed on these 10 unwholesome actions very, very carefully. It's not just something that was added to the suttas, by authors in a later time, because it happens too many times in the suttas for us to actually disregard this. For example, in this Majjhima Nikaya 73, in this discourse to 𝓤𝓾𝓷𝓲𝓼, this wanderer, this 𝓤𝓾𝓷𝓲𝓼, again, the Buddha actually speaks about these 10 unwholesome actions as well. If you actually go through this, right, it's a fairly long sutta, but if you look at this, see, the Buddha actually talks about what? The restraint from killing, restraint from taking what's not given, restraint from sensual misconduct, lying, slanderous speech, okay, harsh speech, frivolous chatter, covetousness. You can look at the cursor here, covetousness, and then malevolence, which means the ill will to hope someone will die or will be killed or will be extinguished. And you actually have this wrong view as well, that you don't believe there's rebirth or results from giving, from supporting parents, from good practicing renunciants. There are actually such renunciants around. You hold wrong views about such matters, and you hold tenaciously to these wrong views, and because of this, if you perform these 10 unwholesome actions, then the Buddha says, then you are creating the potential. It's as good as you being cast to the woeful plains. These 10 unwholesome actions. See, even the Buddha also spoke to this wanderer 𝓤𝓾𝓷𝓲𝓼 about this 10 unwholesome actions. See, the Buddha not only he taught the lay people, in Sala, and also this Varanja, right, about these 10 unwholesome actions. Even the wanderers as well, the Buddha also spoke about these 10 unwholesome actions. Again, not only the Buddha, spoke of these 10 unwholesome actions. Even the Buddha's disciple, also spoke about these 10 unwholesome actions. You see here from this Majjhima Nikaya 84, if you read this sutta, he says, thus have I heard at one time this Bhante Kachana, the great, was staying near Madura, in the Gunda Grove in Avantiputta, in Gunda Grove. This Avantiputta was actually the king of the Madura, the kingdom of Madura. This king was called Avantiputta. He actually heard about this Bhante Kachana, and a great reputation about this Bhante Kachana. And you see here this sutta, right? When you see that when the sutta starts by actually describing where a disciple was staying, this means that the Buddha has actually passed into Paranibbana already. Otherwise, in any suttas, normally when the Buddha was still alive, right, the sutta will actually start by saying where the Buddha was, in Savatthi, or in the squirrels feeding ground, normally the sutta will actually start by describing where the Buddha was, when the Buddha was alive. But because this sutta actually started by describing where the Buddha's disciple was. I mean, this happened after the Buddhas had passed into Parinibbana. And again, this king asked this Bhante Kachana, he says, actually, this sutta actually is quite a long sutta, but in essence, this king, this Avantiputta, was actually asking this Venerable Kachana. He says, Brahmins are actually the best caste, at that time, because Brahmins were actually the highest caste, right? So he actually asked this Venerable Kachana, Brahmins are the best, all the other castes are low, Brahmins are the fairest caste of all, because Brahmins, they're quite fair, compared to the others are actually quite dark. So they say, Brahmins are very fair, and all other castes are dark, and only Brahmins are pure, the non-Brahmins they are not pure, and Brahmins are sons of Brahma, born out of Brahma's mouth, born out of Brahma, formed by Brahma, heirs to Brahma. What does the good Venerable Kachana say to this? Of course, this is a very long sutta, but in a nutshell, what this Venerable Kachana is saying that if the person actually does unwholesome actions, okay, by body, speech, and mind, then there's actually no difference between whether you're a Brahmin or whether you are a Kshatriya or whether you are actually the untouchable, because all will actually be punished, by the king, by being dragged and being beheaded, or by being chained, or or by being killed, by various form of punishment. So there's no difference. This is what he's trying to say. So when this Bhante Kachana, describes in terms of misconduct by body, speech, and mind, you see what he says here. Firstly, he says this person actually commits onslaught of creature, killing, then taking what is not given, stealing, wrongly enjoys pleasure of senses, sensual misconduct, liar. See the Buddha, then Bhante Kachana says a slanderous speech, harsh speech, gossip, the four unwholesome by speech, and then also three by mind. Covetousness, malevolent in mind, means hoping someone will die, and then and wrong view as well. So if you do this 3, 4, 3, 3 by body, 4 by speech, 3 by mind, then you'll be actually punished, by the king, and then upon the breakup of the body, right? Whether you are a Brahmin or whether you are Kshatriya or whether you are a merchant or whether you are untouchable, all of these who committed these 10 unwholesome actions will be born in the woeful plains, in the sorrowful plains, down to Niraya hell. So you see what Bhante Kachana is saying, it doesn't matter which caste you are in. If you do perform any of these 10 unwholesome actions, then you not only you'll be punished, by king, in this present life, but upon the breakup of your body, you'll be actually also then end up in the woeful plains. So again, here the Buddha actually talks about the 10 unwholesome actions. Again, in this SN 42.8 as well, I will not elaborate more on this. You can actually refer this yourself. This is a sutta, where the Buddha actually, he actually tries to explain that the teaching of other sects, like for example, the Niganta Nagaputta, when Niganta Nattaputta, when what he teaches in terms of observing sila, is different, from what the Buddha actually taught about observing sila. This Niganta Nattaputta says, if you commit any of the if you breach any of the precepts, then you actually go to the awful plains. But the Buddha is actually saying that it does not mean that if you commit any of the breaking of any of the precepts, that you will 100% necessarily go to the woeful plains, because the Buddha says, if you are able to realize that what you have done is wrong, for example, you actually realize that breaking the 5 precepts is wrong, and you know that that is unwholesome, and you then you then realize that what you have done is wrong, and you make the resolution that you will not do it anymore, and you abandon the unwholesome actions of actually breaking the 5 precepts. And by virtue of this, then you're creating the good potential again, and it does not necessarily mean that you will 100% go to hell, or the woeful plains. You, as opposed to someone, he knows that he has committed the 5 precepts, breaking the 5 precepts, and he keeps on dwelling on the fact that he has broken the 5 precepts, and he becomes very remorseful, he becomes very depressed, and he becomes he keeps on thinking that, oh no, I'm going to actually fall into the woeful plains because I've actually broken the precepts. So the Buddha says, that is not the way that he has taught the Dhamma. The Dhamma is actually about abandoning the unwholesome action. So if you can actually make the resolution and abandon unwholesome actions, then you'll be able to rectify and redeem yourself, and you'll be able to overcome, and improve yourself going forward, to create the likelihood of being reborn in the Sugati Bhumi, in the happy destinations. So in this sutta itself, the Buddha also talks about these 10 unwholesome actions as well. 3, 4, 3. I will not actually go deep into this, but you can actually refer to this sutta that's called the Sangha Sutta, the conch trumpet. So this SN 42.8 is another evidence as well. The Buddha speaks about the 10 unwholesome actions. And again in MN 9 as well, this Venerable Sariputta also talks about the 10 unwholesome actions. So if you can see from these various suttas that I shared with you, you can find that the Buddha, in speaking about observing the morality or the sila by the lay people, the Buddha has actually, in some suttas, the Buddha actually talks about observing the 5 precepts, and then in the other suttas I also highlighted to you, the Buddha talks about the 5 precepts plus another 3 additional 3 precepts in terms of speech, which in total 8. And then in the subsequent suttas, the Buddha also talks about observing your sila in terms of abstaining from the 10 unwholesome actions. So from here we can see that when you read suttas, you should not just look at read just based on one sutta alone, and you form conclusion that this is what the Buddha has actually taught. You should actually then study various suttas, and try to piece together all the suttas and come to a composite, and collective view as to what the Buddha has actually taught. So if you look at the various suttas, we can see that there's strong evidence that the Buddha has emphasized over and over again that in order to ensure, that we maintain our human status at the very least and do not fall into the woeful plains, we must keep in mind, and be mindful at all times that we do not commit any of the 10 unwholesome actions, like I described earlier. 3, by way of body, killing, stealing, sensual misconduct. 4, by speech, in terms of lying, in terms of slanderous or malicious speech, in terms of harsh speech, and in terms of frivolous talk, in terms of gossiping, in terms of nonsensical speech, and also in terms of 3 actions by mind, which is covetousness, you covet others people's properties, and in terms of malevolence, the ill will that you want some people extinguish, and also in terms of wrong view, you have whole wrong views about what the Buddha actually taught, and you do not you hold to these wrong views very tenaciously, and because of this, of 10 unwholesome actions, the Buddha says that you are creating the strong likelihood of being reborn in the woeful plains. So we should actually take heed that in our practice of sila in itself, of course, the 5 precepts are essential. This is actually what we recite, every day, to actually strengthen our resolution, to safeguard our sila. We recite our 5 precepts, every morning, and to safeguard 5 precepts. But at the same time, we must also take heed of the Buddha's advice, in the Salayaka Sutta, in the sutta about the Varanja Sutta, and the other suttas, all the various suttas, the Madura, about this king in Madura, the Madura kingdom, All these suttas actually tell us that the Buddha has emphasized over and over again. These are not just the suttas that in the Pali canon. So many suttas are that I just extracted only a few. That the Buddha has emphasized about these 10 unwholesome actions. So in addition to the 5 precepts, also ensure that you safeguard your 10 safeguard and abstain from the 10 unwholesome actions, or try your best to abandon, to avoid these 10 unwholesome actions to the best ability that you can. Also always keep in the back of your mind, these 10 unwholesome actions should not be committed. So with this we find that we must, as lay Buddhists, we must observe the 5 precepts, and also in addition the 10 unwholesome actions, so that we actually practice in a sufficient manner to ensure that we can at least maintain our human status, and not descend into the woeful plains in our next life. And as I mentioned, keeping the sila is very important, but in order for us to safeguard our sila, it is very important, that we actually safeguard our mind. We watch our mind at all times, in terms of the sankhara, the intentions that arise in us. Because how well we safeguard our sila, is not just about bodily actions, but it has a lot to do, with our mind. We need to watch our mind. Every single intention or sankhara that arises in your mind, you must be able to catch it, to safeguard your mind. It's just like what the Buddha mentions in AN 3.105, the Kutta Sutta, right? It's about this roof that's not properly attached. If the roof is not properly attached, then the rain will seep in, and because of that, the beams and the walls will get wet and soggy as well. So it's the same thing, if your mind is not safeguarded, then your actions by body, speech, and mind will actually be unwholesome and soiled, because you don't safeguard your mind, you don't watch your mind. Okay, and how do you then safeguard your mind? Like I always mention, you must keep your mindfulness, maintain your sati, in your 6 sense doors. That's very, very important. But of course, you always start with the 5 sense doors first. Keep your sati, in terms of your eyes, your eye base, your nose base, your ear base, your tongue base, your body base, and also your mind base. So, you first of all, you maintain your mindfulness in the 5 sense doors, and once you become anchored, in the 5 sense doors, then you're able to actually see what actually happens in your mind, because you are not anchored in the present moment, right? And you'll be able to see, whether any lobha, dosa, moha, arises in your mind. You watch your mind, is there any defilement that arises in you or not? Or if there is any defilement, for example, you get greedy, you get lustful, you get angry, just note, that this has arisen, and also watch, the intention that arises in you. What is it that you intend to do? Do you intend to lash back? Do you intend to actually scold back, using abusive words? Do you intend to actually do something that's unwholesome? So you must always maintain this, and see how your mind reacts to it, and also see, how this defilements that arise in the mind arise, through causes and conditions. How does it arise? Is it because, how does it arise? Due to various conditions and also past conditioning. Then from there you'll be able to see, non-self, in all the conditioned phenomena. So that's why I've actually covered this before, MN 148, in the Chachaka Sutta, the 6 sense of 6, the Buddha talks about, the importance, of maintaining your mindfulness in the 6 sense doors, and once you actually are anchored in your 6 sense doors, and you actually try to see what happens in your mind, and how things that arise in your mind, arise through causes and conditions, then you'll be able to also investigate, your 5 aggregates and how they arise, through causes and conditions, and from there you'll be able to see the non-self nature of your 5 aggregates, and also they're empty. Okay, and then you'll be able to grow, being disenchanted, and dispassion. Then you'll be able to also see that things are basically empty by nature. They arise through causes and conditions, and they are actually dependently arisen through causality. And once you see that, then you'll be able to see that actually everything is actually everything is non-self, and you'll be able to see that that there is actually no identity view, no Sakkaya Ditthi, and then your faith in the Buddha, becomes very strong, and it becomes unwavering, and there's confirmed, verified faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and because of this, you'll be able to attain stream entry, because of that. So that's why it's very, very important for us to actually start practicing from today itself, safeguard your sila. And to do that, you must actually watch your mind, it's very important. And how do you watch your mind? Maintain the mindfulness on your 5 sense doors, and then after that, in the 6th sense as well, in terms of, what happens in your mind, when you see something, when you hear something, when you smell something, when you taste something, when you touch something, when you think of something, how does your mind react to it? Is there loba, dosa, moha? Is there greed, anger, and delusion in you? From there, investigate, and also try to practice self-restraint, whenever there's any intention, try to see, whether it's unwholesome or wholesome. If it's unwholesome, abandon it. If it's wholesome, try to strengthen it, So with this, you'll be able to see, the conditionality, in whatever that arises in you. And from there, you'll be able to achieve the various, stages of enlightenment, and you'll be able to uproot all the factors in you, and then that's where, slowly and gradually, you'll be able to get out of samsara, and even in this lifetime itself, you'll be able to attain stream entry. So that's why the Buddha always says, the very cornerstone of any spiritual practice, before we can even speak of any spiritual progress to attain stream entry or even to arahantship, the very first thing you must do is to observe and safeguard your sila, health, self-restraint. This is the cornerstone of any spiritual practice. And from there, practice gradually, from dana to sila, and then to bhavana, and then to watching your mind, watching your 6 sense bases, your 5 aggregates, and from there you'll be able to realize, non-self in a profound way, such that you'll be able to attain the Dhamma eye, which is able to see how things arise, through causality, through conditionality, Then from there, you only have 7 more lifetimes to go, in the samsara, and that itself, is a great achievement. And we should not actually make our life in a present life as a human being. Don't let it, don't live our lives in vain. We should actually catch hold of this opportunity, this very, very rare opportunity as a human being, to practice it to the best we can, and arrive, at least attain stream entry in our life, try to strive towards that, so that we're able to, take a slow boat out of samsara, up to 7 lifetimes, from there, we'll be able to attain, the ultimate happiness of liberation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'll try to share. All right. Thank you, Brother Ghatikara Loo, for the insightful Dhamma sharing. Brother Loo had reminded us that the Buddha had explained the rarity of the chance to be born as a human being, and we should be heedful in our practice of the 10 wholesome actions of the verbal, bodily, and our mental conducts, in addition to our 5 precepts. This is so that we should not be remorseful and suffer the repercussions of our 10 unwholesome actions. And in this way, we can have good conditions to practice, and at the breakup of the body, we can still continue to be able to have good conditions to be able to practice the Dhamma and strive towards our final liberation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Dear brothers and sisters, we have spent about 1 hour and 46 minutes reflecting on the Buddha's words, keeping our thoughts focused and wholesome throughout this period, and thus accrued abundance of merits. Therefore, let's dedicate the merits accrued to our guardian devas, naga spirits, and all beings, including our departed relatives. May they rejoice in the merits and continue to shower us with our family with blessings, at the same time protect all of us from all dangers and sickness. May we be blessed with wisdom to walk the path and eventually attain the final liberation, Nibbana. Over to you, Sister Doris.
Thank you, Sister Lily. Akka satta cha bhummatta deva naga mahiddika punyantang anumoditva chiram rakhantu lokasasanang etthavata cha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe deva sabbe bhuta sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Imina punya kammena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu ya vanitbana pattiya. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, everyone. Hopefully we will see you again next week for our next Sunday Pūjā. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.